Johnson, and I'm chair of the Civilian Oversight Commission of Los Angeles County. I welcome you to tonight's LA County Virtual Forum, Icy Conditions, Know Your Rights and Navigate the Law. I will start with the customary land acknowledgement with which we begin all official LA County meetings of the COC. The County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Kij, and Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including, in no particular order, the Fernandeño Tataviam Band of Mission Indians, the Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California Tribal Council, the Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, the Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians Kij Nation, Yuhaviatum of San Manuel Nation, the San Fernando Band of Mission Indians, the Coastal Band of Chumash Nation, the Gabrielino Tongva Nation, and the Gabrielino Tongva Tribe. To learn more about the First Peoples of Los Angeles County, please visit the Los Angeles City County Native American Indian Commission at this website, lanaic.lacounty.gov. I'll now turn it over to our Executive Director, Charmaine Mosley. Charmaine, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Good evening, everyone. Amid ongoing concerns about federal immigration operations in Los Angeles, the purpose of this forum is to explore contemporary issues related to immigration enforcement, transparency, civil rights, public accountability, evidence gathering, and the public's right to document law enforcement activity. A local clergy member, Reverend Julie Davis, will share accounts of alleged rights violations, shedding light on community concerns regarding immigration enforcement, detention conditions, and treatment. Then Enrique Robles from Representative Judy Shu's office will examine the resources and support that congressional officers can provide related to immigration detention, including congressional casework assistance and an update about a recent visit to a federal immigration detention facility. Next, the Office of Immigrant Affairs will explore what services and resources are available to immigrants in Los Angeles County. LASD Lieutenant Hernandez will explore the role of constitutional policing and immigration enforcement. It will examine the department's responsibilities to uphold constitutional protections, including due process, equal protection, and adherence to appropriate jurisdictional boundaries. The discussion will also address Angelino's right to observe and record law enforcement officers in public spaces, provided such activity does not interfere with lawful enforcement operations. Additionally, it will provide guidance on the distinction between lawful observation and documentation of law enforcement activities and conduct that may constitute interference with official duties. We have 4 panelist presentations. Following introductions and remarks from our speakers, we will open the floor to public comments from the audience to gather community feedback. Together, we hope these discussions will offer community members an opportunity to better understand their rights, navigate complex legal processes, and engage in informed dialogue about immigration enforcement practices affecting the Los Angeles community. Commission staff will now go over the option for real-time AI translation and the code of conduct. Thank you. Robert?
Thank you, Charmaine. Before we proceed, I'd like to reiterate that we are providing real-time AI interpretation of this meeting that supports more than 50 languages. Here's how you can access Wordly. On the screen, you'll see a QR code and a URL. Scan the QR code and click on the URL, then click on Attend. Once you have chosen your preferred language, translated captions will appear automatically on your device. You can listen to the translation in real time by unmuting the speaker icon. I will now go over these instructions in Spanish. Le damos la bienvenida a esta reunión a miembros de la comunidad que hablan español. No tenemos un intérprete, pero sus comentarios serán traducidos al inglés para la comisión después de la reunión. Si quieres un intérprete en el futuro, puedes enviar una solicitud 48 horas antes de nuestras reuniones. Estamos ofreciendo interpretación mediante inteligencia artificial en tiempo real. Pueden agregar a Wordly en la pantalla. En la pantalla verán un código QR y un URL. Escanean el código QR y hagan clic en el URL. Y a continuación seleccionen Attend. Cuando hayan elegido su idioma de preferencia, los subtítulos traducidos aparecen automáticamente. Podrán escuchar la traducción en tiempo real activando el sonido del icono del altavoz. Gracias. Now I will go over the code of conduct in English. To ensure a productive meeting for all, please follow the code of conduct as follows. Speakers must cease speaking when their allotted time is ended. Public comment must be related to tonight's forum session topics. Be respectful of the views expressed by the panelists, staff, commission members, and community members. Please refrain from profane, personal, threatening, derogatory, demeaning, or abusive statements. And a person engaging in conduct that disrupts the meeting is subject to being muted or removed from the meeting. Now I will announce this code of conduct in Spanish. Por favor, consulte nuestro código de conducta. Le pedimos que sea respetuoso y abstenga de hacer comentarios profanos, personales, degradantes o abusivas. Por favor, sea respetuoso de las opiniones de la audiencia, los oradores, el personal y no interrumpir una persona que tenga una conducta que interrumpa está sujeta a ser expulsada de la reunión. Si desea hacer comentarios públicos, por favor, si desea hacer comentarios públicos, le vamos a dar más instrucciones después. Gracias. I'll now turn it over to Chair Johnson.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you all for joining us this evening. I do want to note that we are gathering here tonight on the one-year anniversary of expanded immigration enforcement, ICE raids, terrorist tactics that have engulfed our communities now for the past year, dating back to last June, which included the tragic and I would say thuggish tackling of our own US Senator on live television, which most Americans witnessed in the days ensuing that incident in June of 2025. It's also Pride Month, and I give a special shout out to all of the LGBTQ plus people and allies who are joining us here this evening. Celebrations of resilience, perseverance, respect for diversity, and community cohesion and tenacity are all the more important under these conditions. And I thank all of you for being part of this forum tonight, where some of these values are both championed, discussed, and celebrated. Before we get started, I would just like to introduce our panelists for tonight. First, Reverend Julie Davis is the community pastor at Central Avenue Christian Church in Pasadena, a healing and inclusive spiritual community for those hurt by religion and seeking the sacred. She has worked professionally in schools, churches, nonprofits, and clinical sites, and is passionate about facilitating gatherings where people can connect to their sources of joy and strength. After pursuing a PhD in American literature at Brown University, Julie taught high school for 13 years and then completed her Master of Divinity in Interfaith Chaplaincy. And I want to give a special shout out to Reverend Davis for her work seeking sanctuary and bearing witness outside of a healthcare environment where someone detained by ICE here in Los Angeles County was being held. A bearing of witness so influential perhaps that the patient was moved surreptitiously in the small hours of the evening following Reverend Davis's bearing of witness. Reverend Davis, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's a real pleasure to have you with us for this Icy Conditions, Know Your Rights, Navigate the Law Forum. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Hans. I trust my audio is still good. I do want to say that Executive Director Mosley gave me a little more credit than I deserve for being here tonight to report on specificity of immigration offenses. Other panelists have much more to say than I on those matters, though for sure the livelihoods and safety of both my congregation members and my colleagues, especially my Latinx reverends, are being affected. My hope tonight is to kick off this meeting with some moral thinking about the role of exercising our constitutional rights. And I do want to thank you for allowing me to give my perspective today as a faith leader who is very concerned about how the people that I'm called to protect are being treated. As Hans said, I'm the community pastor at Central Avenue Church in Pasadena. And one of our ministries is to help those who've been hurt by the church. But we're also working to do what the church was originally supposed to do. And so today I want to reiterate to everyone, and especially to our governing officials, what that is. The church is a witness. We bear witness to injustice. Therefore, an infringement on our right to observe is an infringement on our religious freedom. All Abrahamic traditions are called to witness. And in all three of these traditions, in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, there is a name for one who undertakes the grave responsibility to witness injustice, cruelty, greed, and corruption. And that name is prophet. And to clear up any understandable misconceptions, the role of prophet is not primarily to see the future. The role of the prophet is to reveal the present. Prophets are people who see that which others have turned away from. They see the poor who are being exploited and disregarded. They see the immigrant who is being treated like an animal. And they call out the powerful and all the minions of the powerful who are responsible for these abuses. They call out their transgressions and they hold them accountable. Just this week, in my role as a teacher at a graduate school, I was reading one of the Jewish prophets, and his complaints sounded so contemporary. I got the chills. The prophet Amos was quoted famously by Martin Luther King Jr. in his I Have a Dream speech. Amos is a prophet for Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. And he railed against the government, against government abuses, and many of them sound very, very familiar. Amos went to the heart of the nation, to the court of the king, right to the seat of power, and reported all the injustices he had seen. Among the evils he named was the fact that the king and his men were carrying away, kidnapping entire communities, forcing people into exile away from their homes. They were unlawfully enriching themselves by exploiting the vulnerable. It sounds so familiar. You have turned justice into poison, Amos told them. And they tried to kick him out of the court, out of the kingdom. They told him to bear witness somewhere else because he was disturbing the king's peace. But Amos said, I have no choice. Witnessing and crying out and holding accountable, these were tasks given to him by God. And these are tasks hounded down to me and to every person of faith. We have no choice. We have a duty to witness. And we have to protect the precious constitutional rights that uphold that duty and allow us to do it safely. The ability to witness is our constitutional right, not only as citizens, but as people of faith with the right to religious freedom. Without our constitutional First Amendment rights, we cannot practice our religions the way we are called to in Judaism, Christianity, Islam. We have to be able to film injustice, to record and report it as it is happening, to hold the responsible accountable. We have to have access to the prisons and detention centers, to information about where our people are so that the taken are not lost, and so that the taken know that we are watching, and so that we can give their families what little comfort they can find. Amos told the kingdom that they had turned justice into poison. How do we reclaim justice from the disease of corruption and cruelty? We do what Justice Louis Brandeis prescribed in 1913. We disinfect with sunlight. We use publicity as a remedy for the disease that protects the guilty and enfeebles our institutions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Reverend Davis. Thank you for your insights, and thank you also for shedding light on the Abrahamic traditions, their commonalities, and the interweavings of these faith traditions, and how they buttress religious freedom and our First Amendment, an important constitutional protection which is so fundamental to all others, much like the right to vote is so constitutive of all other rights in our democracy. Thank you also for your description, welding present moments to previous prophetic statements and Old Testament prophets for those of us rooted in the Christian tradition, and for talking about the importance of our constitutional rights for the bearing of witness by all professionals, clergy, and others. Our next panelist is Enrique Robles, the District Chief of Staff for Congressmember Judy Chu, representing California's 28th Congressional District, inclusive of Pasadena, Monterey Park, and foothill communities that include now La Cañada Flintridge. I'm very pleased to have Enrique Robles here with us, in part because of the exceptional work that his member of Congress, whom he has to work very hard to keep up with, has been doing on this issue throughout the intensified period of what Los Angeles County Supervisor Janice Hahn has called the federal invasion of Los Angeles County, which of course is not limited to Los Angeles County, but has embroiled all Californians and many other jurisdictions targeted by actions of the federal government, including Minnesota and the nation's capital. Enrique has been part of Congressmember Chu's team for 15 years, and during that time has been lead staff on several significant initiatives, many of which have drawn deserved great publicity, including the designation of the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument, the Emerald Necklace that Member of Congress Judy Chu has led the way in articulating and helping to enact, and the establishment of the San Gabriel Valley Veterans Healthcare Clinic in Arcadia. Enrique has also led her response to local emergencies, such as the Eaton Fire in January of 2025, the Monterey Park shootings in January of 2023, and ICE immigration raids. Enrique, thank you so much for being with us tonight. It's a real pleasure to have your insights and some of your opportunity to reflect on them here. The floor is yours. Welcome to the COC Forum.
Thank you, Hans, and good evening, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. It looks like my audio is working fine, so I'm going to keep going. Great. So yeah, what I want to do right now is kind of give an overview of a quick overview of where we're at, and then give information on the rights that people have in terms of dealing with ICE, and then resources that are available to them. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So, as Hans mentioned at the top of this program, we are at the 1-year mark of the Trump administration going after our communities by increasing ICE operations and particularly targeting immigrant families. And the reality is that it's not going to stop anytime soon. The Republicans in Congress, including the Trump administration, is very insistent on continuing to fund ICE and CBP. So just yesterday, June 9th, Republicans in Congress passed a $70 billion budget package that funds ICE and CBP through 2029. That's the end of the Trump term. And that actually brings the total funding levels of ICE and CBP to about $246 billion since the start of the Trump administration. That's very significant. It's 3 times higher than what ICE normally gets annually. So they're really committed to this, and it's our job to push back. So next slide. Here, I just want to, the good thing about being in LA County is that we have a lot of elected officials, representatives, and members of Congress that are very committed to standing up against ICE, CBP, speaking out against injustice. And I'm proud to work for Congresswoman Judy Chu, who does that on a regular basis. First, I want to highlight that she voted against any additional funding to ICE and CBP. Her vote was no, and it's something that we will continue to do. She has also introduced legislation such as the Visible Act, which prohibits ICE officers from wearing non-medical face coverings, so that way they can't. Part of the problem at the beginning was, and it's still an issue, is these ICE agents jumping out of vehicles and just kidnapping people with no identification. You don't know who they are. So we introduced legislation to stop that practice, and it's still going through the House. And then one big thing that Hans had highlighted earlier was our oversight visits to the detention facilities. The one that we have visited several times, I think it's 3 or 4 times in the last year, is the Adelanta ICE Processing Center. We were just there last week because the Congresswoman was meeting with 3 detainees who were participating in a hunger strike. She was joined by Congress members Pete Aguilar and also Congressmember Jimmy Gomez. And we met with those individuals, and they shared with us the conditions that they were going through. They informed us that the food is horrible. They described it as dog food, very wet, just kind of like thrown on a plate, disgusting, just inedible. Also unclean drinking water. And they also highlighted that their medical needs are not being met. So for the majority of medical conditions, when they need help, they're typically always just prescribed a painkiller. And it's interesting because every time you talk to any of the detainees in the Adelanta Processing Center, everybody will come back and say that they were prescribed painkillers. It's kind of like a common thing, or the only thing that they really do. And so we have a lot of concerns. One of the detainees we met with has a cyst growing in the back of his head that needs to be operated on, and ICE has not granted the approval for that, even though the doctors at Adelanta said it needs to be removed. So that's something that we're following up on. And they also informed us about retaliation that they go through every time they raise concerns, especially those who are participating in the hunger strike. They've been told that they'll be put into solitary confinement, and in fact, some of them have, just for complaining or participating in a hunger strike. And this is not a surprise to us. Adelanta is one of the worst places there is. It's been like that for years. Congresswoman Chu has actually been advocating for its closure for at least a decade now. And in the last year alone, 5 people have died in Adelanta since since the start of Trump's second term. So we've called for the closure of Adelanta. It's obviously not going to happen under this administration. So what we're trying to do in the meantime is to make sure there's accountability at these centers by sharing their stories, by sharing these detainees' stories. So we'll continue to visit Adelanta. That wasn't their last one. We will be doing it again, just to maintain that oversight and to highlight stories like that. Next slide. So for the rest of this presentation, I want to share with you, what to do to prepare for an emergency, understanding your rights, how to locate a detained family member, and also finding legal and community support. I'll be addressing this as if you're the person that needs this information, but obviously, if feel free to share it with family, friends, people who who are undocumented, because this is something that would be helpful to them in the next couple years. Next slide. So the first thing, family preparedness before an emergency. You got to think of this as like you're preparing for an earthquake. We always are told to prepare for the big one and get things ready. Well, for our immigrant communities, this is the big one. We got to prepare. So the first thing to do is to develop a family communication plan. And that means identifying trusted emergency contacts, such as teachers, neighbors, relatives, aunts, uncles, whoever is in your circle of trusted individuals. Make sure you have their emergency contacts and that those are written down, because your family might need them. If you are the sole primary provider of your family, they are going to need this information to be able to get in touch with people who can be of assistance, family, teachers, etc. In that vein, you want to gather important documents and store them in a safe place. And in an upcoming slide, I'll share some of those important documents that you want to keep. But passports and immigration papers, you want to keep them in a safe place that your family can get to should you be detained. If you have children, it's recommended that you designate a temporary caregiver by completing a caregiver authorization affidavit. You can get those forms. I would recommend reaching out to some nonprofit organizations like CHIRLA, Immigrant Defenders, and there's others. They have those forms available online, so you can check them out yourself. But what this does is that it gives the authorization to a relative or even a non-relative to take care of your child and make certain decisions. Some of those decisions is enrolling them in school, excusing them for school absences, consent to participate in school programs. If they're relatives, consent to medical care, vaccinations. So it's a helpful document that should you be detained, your kids will have support that they need to keep moving forward. It is not it does not grant legal custody, but it just gives them, you are giving the authority to somebody to take care of your children during your absence. And also memorize important phone numbers. It's suggested, 2 phone numbers, whether it's your partner or your attorney, friend, because if you are detained, you're not going to have access to a cell phone. Myself included, I don't remember necessarily the numbers I have saved in my phone. So it's good to memorize, at least 2 important phone numbers that you can, of individuals that you can reach out to. Next slide. So some important documents, passports and IDs, birth certificates. Medical records are important, so like medical insurance, again, for your children, in case your trusted contact needs to take them to the doctor. Their medical insurance is listed there, along with any medical information. School records, immigration paperwork, financial documents like bank accounts, again, for people that you can trust. And you want to put all this in a safe place that your family can get to should you be detained. And also there's ICE privacy waiver form that I'll go into more detail later, but it would be also good to include that. You would want to fill it out ahead of time, because I will give authorization to your attorney or your family member or your member of Congress to try to support. So again, you want to gather those documents and put them in the safe place and tell your loved ones how to access them. Next slide. So you want to know your rights. And there's different scenarios in which you might encounter ICE. The first is, what if they come up to your home? ICE is at your door. From the start, you want to stay calm, take a deep breath, because you do have rights. You do not need to let ICE or any law enforcement agency into your home without a judicial warrant. So keep your screen door closed. Talk to them through the screen door. If you don't have a screen door, try to maybe do it through a window or possibly over a fence, but communicate with them that way. However, don't answer too many questions. Ask them what their purpose is. At that point, usually they want to, if it's ICE, they may want to enter your home. What you can do, what is your right, is to demand to see a judicial warrant. And you got to be careful in this situation, because ICE, there have been many instances where they will provide what they say is a warrant, but in reality, it is an administrative, an ICE administrative warrant, which is not the same as a judicial warrant. A judicial warrant that will allow law enforcement, including ICE, to get in to enter your home, but an ICE administrative warrant does not. They're very different. So you'll want them to either slip those paperwork under the door or through the window or over the fence. That way you can take a look at it and know what you're dealing with. And should they enter the home, or if they want to give you paperwork to sign, do not sign documents without any legal advice. Again, that is your right. Should they enter and you get arrested, do not sign any documents until you speak with an attorney. Next slide. So you'll hear me reference a lot of the nonprofit organizations we work with, and this is one of them, the Immigrant Defenders Law Center. They have a good image here of an ICE administrative warrant versus a judicial warrant. On the left side, you have the ICE warrant. You know it's an ICE warrant because at the top it says U.S. Department of Homeland Security. That's kind of like the big giveaway. And on the right, you know it's a judicial warrant because it lists the federal or state court that is submitting this. And then also at the bottom, they'll have a signature of a judge. That's not it though. Like, you know, if they give you the judicial warrant, you want to make sure it has your actual home address. It is your address, and you want to make sure it's signed by a judge and that the date is current. At that point, then they're legally allowed to enter your home, but it's good to make sure you check all that, because if there have been instances where people have been tricked into allowing ICE into their home. So this is just an example, and you can find that online as well at the Immigrant Defenders Law Center or other nonprofit groups, immigrant advocate groups. Next slide, please. So know your rights if ICE comes to your workplace. Again, I reiterate, it's important to stay calm as possible, because, you know, one thing people might want to do is run, and you don't want to run because that will be used against you. So just stay calm and ask them if you're being detained or if you're free to go. They're going to ask you a bunch of questions. You do not need to answer those questions. You know, you can tell them that based on your Fifth Amendment right, you do not need to answer their questions or sign any documents. And then also based on your Fourth Amendment right, you do not have to give permission to allow ICE to search your belongings. So if they're holding you for too long, you can ask them if you're being detained, arrested, or if you're free to leave, because without probable cause, they can't arrest you. Well, I would also recommend that you carry a red card with you. That would be very helpful. You can get one of those red cards at ilrc.org/red cards, something that you can print out. We've had a few at our office. A lot of congressional offices have, and also state legislative offices, but you can just print it out at home. That's from the Immigration Legal Rights Center. So it'd be good to check out that website. Next slide. So this is an example of one of the red cards. You can simply hand that card to ICE or CBP, and it kind of speaks for itself. Okay, next slide. So what should happen if you have a loved one that's detained? It's a very scary situation. You're trying to figure out where they're at. So one thing that you can do is use the ICE online detainee locator system to find your loved one. Usually the one way to be able to find your loved one is with their A number. That's called an alien number that they get through their immigration documents, and their date of birth. You can put that in the system and it'll populate where they're located. Now, sometimes it takes a while for that to happen, especially right at the beginning. Obviously, it's not going to happen within a few hours. So one thing to keep in mind when folks are detained in LA County, they tend to be taken to B12, which is in downtown LA. It's the ICE field office location. They do have a detention center, but it's called B12. We've been there a couple times as well to do oversight. And then from there, they'll get transferred to other facilities. Oftentimes it's Adelanta, but typically it's going to be dependent on capacity at facilities. So if Adelanta has reached its capacity, they could go to California City, Arizona, or somewhere else. But typically it's because of capacity, and normally, a lot of them will be transferred to Adelanta. So take a look at locator.ice.gov. You can also contact the ICE field office directly. The number's there, but you can Google it, or the Adelanto detention facility, should you think that they're located there. And in all your communications with ICE, and once you find your loved one, you want to keep records of those communications and save any case numbers. Next slide, please. And if you have a loved one that's detained, please seek help. There's a lot of people that can help out. And one of the greatest resources available are our immigrant advocacy nonprofit organizations that also provide legal counsel. We work with them all the time. So some of the folks that we've worked with are CHIRLA, which is the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, Immigrant Defenders, Bet Zedek. Some that I haven't listed here, in the San Gabriel Valley, we have the Immigration Resource Center of the SGV. There's also Neighborhood Legal Services of Los Angeles County, Legal Aid Foundation. And if you need help connecting with these agencies or organizations, you can always contact your member of Congress or state representative, and they'll find a way to connect you since we work with them so much. But reach out for help. You need an attorney. That is absolutely vital in this situation. And also touch base with trusted contacts. I'm glad that Reverend Davis was here, because the faith-based community has really come out in force to help in these situations. School districts, friends, reach out for help. And then you can also, and I encourage you to contact your member of Congress. We get a lot of calls from people who are detained, and they might need help just finding them. They might reach out for help getting the medical attention, because a lot of times when you can finally connect with them, they're telling you, I haven't gotten my meds. They won't feed me. They won't listen to my concerns about my ailments. Reach out to us and we can make sure that those are highlighted. We'll contact our congressional liaisons at ICE, who will then subsequently reach out to folks at Adelanto to connect. We can't offer legal advice. That's beyond our scope. But, if your attorneys are having trouble getting in contact with them, again, that's something we can help with. Or if your attorneys have been able to secure their release, but ICE is still holding them for whatever reason, contact us and we'll contact ICE and let them know, hey, look, here's the court document showing the release of this individual. You need to release them right now. And we've been successful in those situations. But again, you need an attorney, because they're the ones that are going to help with the hearings and the appeals. Our office can only provide guidance, but you really need an attorney to support, which is why I highly encourage you to reach out to these nonprofit organizations. Now, when you contact your member of Congress, to make our lives easier, you need to have an ICE privacy release waiver signed and completed. It's extremely difficult to do if your loved one is detained, because then you got to first find them, then you got to meet with them, and then they got to fill out the form. So what we've been encouraging people to do, and other members of Congress to do, is to fill out this form ahead of time and save it in your pile of documents. Next slide. So this is what the I-601 form looks like. You can get it online, but it's an important document to have. You'll want to designate your, you'll enter your information there. And then there's a section there, it's a little blurry right now for me, but you can indicate who to release information to, and you could put Office of Congresswoman Judy Chu if she's your member of Congress. Or whoever your member of Congress is, you want to put it there. You can also put your attorneys there, or anybody else. But please, if you can, do this ahead of time and then sign it at the bottom, but do not date it, because it's the document is only good 90 days after signed. So do not date it, just sign it and then put it away. Hopefully you'll never use it, but if you do, you can send a copy over to your member of Congress, and that'll make our lives easier in terms of being able to contact ICE, because otherwise they will give us zero information. They're very strict. They don't like dealing with us, and they will not give us information unless we have this signed release form. So again, you can get it online to download. Next slide. So to wrap things up, key takeaways: prepare, ahead of time. This is the big one. Make sure you have a plan, know your rights, and then also do not be afraid to seek help. Legal and community assistance, because there's a lot of people who want to support, and there's no shortage of it. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Incredibly valuable, Enrique. Thank you so much for that rundown. And thank you for the detail of your presentation, all enriched by experience and the anguish of dealing firsthand with people in detention. I don't know that we ever would have expected members of Congress to have to do that degree of diligence and follow-up over the basic conditions of detention, over the degradation of people's humanity and human rights. But I thank you for not only being present, but to share the insights of your work in such a way that others can benefit from them, and with such granular details about signing the I-601 form, but not dating it. That is the kind of extremely valuable insight and unofficial counsel that we really count on our members of Congress who have been on the front lines to be able to share and to be able to access legal guidance that actually helps people facing the nightmare that you describe. What a valuable set of instructions, but also what a valuable firsthand set of descriptions. Now it is my pleasure to recognize our next panelist tonight. Daniel Sharp is a graduate of the program in Public Interest Law and Policy at the UCLA School of Law. He worked for the local implementing partner of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in San Jose, Costa Rica in 2004 to 5, and served as legal director of a major immigrant rights organization from 2005 to 2020. He also taught immigration law at the Western State College of Law here in Los Angeles. Since 2020, Daniel has served as chief of the County of Los Angeles Office of Immigrant Affairs, the OIA, where he works to ensure that OIA protects the rights and advances the well-being of all the immigrants and their families who have made the County of Los Angeles their home. Daniel, thank you for being here. Thank you for your helming of the Office of Immigrant Affairs. And it's a great pleasure to welcome you here for tonight's conversation.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction, and to my fellow panelists for their presentations. And Enrique just covered a wealth of incredibly important info that makes my presentation a little easier. I'll uplift a few of the same resources and then try to focus on some other, some related important topics. And so I want to begin with a sort of another impact of this aggressive immigration enforcement climate. So obviously, first and foremost, impacted families are contending with having loved ones detained and in many instances deported. But in this climate of fear, folks are looking for immigration solutions, folks that have not yet had contact with immigration enforcement and those who have. And sadly, there's been a significant increase in scams targeting individuals that have been impacted and that are looking for solutions. So our Office of Immigrant Affairs is housed within the county's Department of Consumer and Business Affairs that has an investigations team that investigates all types of consumer fraud, including immigration fraud. So we see directly the impacts of these scams and the unauthorized practice of law. So I want to talk about that a little bit before addressing some other resources. So Immigration Matters, as sort of, I think you got a taste from Enrique's presentation. I mean, the consequences are enormous. The law is incredibly complex. And in the past year and a half, it has been changing dramatically through court decisions, administrative policy changes, week to week, sometimes day by day. And so it was already a very complex area of law. And so the only two types of individuals that are allowed to give a person advice in their immigration matters are, of course, licensed attorneys, so people licensed in, because immigration is federal law in California or any other state or Washington, D.C., can practice immigration law here. And then there's also a group of individuals called federally accredited representatives. And these are non-attorneys who work at certain nonprofit organizations that have gone through an extensive certification process where they can show that they have attorney supervision and that they've put their staff through an extensive training so that these non-attorneys who are supervised by lawyers can can be authorized to give legal advice and actually represent individuals before the Department of Homeland Security and even in immigration court, just like attorneys. But this is a relatively small number of non-attorneys. So those are the only two groups of people, licensed attorneys and these federally accredited representatives at certain nonprofit organizations. All other individuals providing immigration services are generally also providing legal advice along with their immigration form preparation and doing that in violation of the law, sometimes with very serious consequences. So our advice is to avoid all other providers of immigration services, not notarios, notaries public, immigration consultants, tax preparers, visa consultants, other self-proclaimed immigration experts cannot give advice to even the most basic questions about whether an individual is eligible for a form of immigration relief, how to answer questions on a form, whether a person or their family member should apply, what the risks may be, whether they have to leave the United States to complete the process. All of those questions require applying the law to the person's facts. That is the essence of giving legal advice, and getting it wrong can have devastating consequences. So there's a link there on the screen to a directory of nonprofit providers really around the country, so that you can search by state and by zip code even to identify an authorized provider. And then want to move on to the next slide. So that, what I just discussed there involves sort of the provision of immigration legal advice, often in brick and mortar businesses, of which there are hundreds around Los Angeles, non-attorneys doling out illicit, unauthorized, illegal advice that can have serious consequences. But we've also seen this uptick in scams in recent years, really since COVID, but a huge increase since the 2024 election and the inauguration of often ads posted on Facebook or on WhatsApp claiming to be law offices, and in some instances utilizing the logo, the name of very reputable organizations like Catholic Charities. Catholic Charities is a nationwide entity that provides a lot of charitable services, provides immigration legal services across the country free of charge, including here in Los Angeles. Scammers have unfortunately impersonated Catholic Charities online and duped people into paying large sums of money for supposed attorney services that were never provided. We also see Facebook ads and WhatsApp groups appearing on people's phones offering licensed attorney services, often for law offices that are located somewhere else. And then we heard from Enrique about the important services of Immigrant Defenders Law Center, an excellent, highly reputable removal defense provider. They were also impersonated in an online scam that duped a number of individuals using their logo. So our recommendation there for the community and folks in our supporting the community is to always seek out the actual contact information of an attorney, of a nonprofit, never through an ad. If you're interested in contacting that attorney or that organization, utilize the state bar, go online, find their actual website, or contact our Office of Immigrant Affairs, our number there at the bottom of the screen, to make sure that you're actually contacting the individual or the organization that you think that you are. And then another scam that has been prevalent in the last year and a half has been folks receiving phone calls from supposed immigration officers who then request financial information or money in order to not detain the person receiving the call or a friend or loved one. So immigration agents engage in many tactics to apprehend people. Enrique provided really important guidance on preparing for that. Immigration agents do not collect money in advance to not detain individuals. These are scams. And so really important to be aware, make folks in your networks aware that these are in fact scams. And then of course, never hire anyone, even in a brick and mortar business, who claims to have those special connections to immigration officials, asks you to sign blank documents, or refuses to provide a written contract or otherwise, in addition to our ongoing recommendation to never use a notary, immigration consultant, or tax preparer for complex immigration matters. So more information available on our Avoiding Fraud and Getting the Right Help landing page, which is linked there on the screen, and then we can proceed to the next slide. And I'm just going to talk really briefly because Enrique covered so many excellent resources already. I just want to kind of lift up a bit of what we're doing here in the county. So our office on our website, which is undergoing a major overhaul. I wish it was live today, but will be very soon. But the site is live, but not the revamped version. So we do have a calendar of upcoming community events, which always has one or two, at least community-facing presentations, Know Your Rights sessions. But then also our office has counselors available Monday through Friday during the day to help folks navigate a bunch of important public resources. So we receive many calls from community members concerned about accessing public services and benefits and programs. They're often concerned about the public charge rule or some other concern about the sharing of their information. So our counselors can sometimes help individuals and families navigate those issues ourselves on the call. We will when individual legal advice or additional higher level counseling is required, we will refer individuals to benefits enrollment agencies and attorneys, often through the BILA network, who can help people navigate sometimes those complicated decisions about whether to enroll or disenroll from a public benefit or service. And then our county also funds a couple really important immigration legal services programs that our office administers. First, there's the Represent LA program that we administer on behalf of the city of Los Angeles and the county that offers legal representation to individuals in removal proceedings, including some folks in detention, and then some other vulnerable immigrant groups that are not in active deportation proceedings but have struggled to access other programs and services. The program Represent LA offers both full scope attorney representation and then some more limited scope services, including individual counseling and some application assistance services. So because the demand has been so high really since last summer and even before that, but especially since June, the program is always operating at capacity. And so the public can contact our office directly. When there is capacity, we will refer folks into the program for full scope representation. But when that is not available, we will work to connect individuals to the one-on-one counseling and the other limited scope services that are available in that program. And then we will be announcing an expansion of the program to add some capacity to represent detainees in their bond hearings. We'll be announcing that probably next month about an expansion that we hope to have online later in the fall. And the public will be able to access those services by contacting our office. And then secondly, I want to note a really important program. The Mobile Immigration Services Program is an initiative that we've overseen since late 2024 to support immigrants experiencing or at risk of homelessness. And this initiative has been implemented through a nonprofit service provider consortium that offers both individual case management support and limited scope immigration legal assistance to folks who may be in shelters or at risk of homelessness. And the idea of the program is to bring services directly to people where they're at. This became especially important after the increased enforcement last June, when folks were often afraid to go out and access services and maybe struggled to navigate online tools. So folks can access that program by contacting our office. And again, they will be referred to one-on-one case management and immigration counseling, one-on-one legal guidance through with qualified nonprofit attorneys and accredited representatives. These are not the only immigration legal resources. The state of California obviously funds a large network of providers. Many of the same providers that we fund through our Represent LA program, but because we're in close contact with a consortium of about 15 organizations providing those services, our office often knows who does or doesn't have capacity for what types of service, and can help direct individuals to service providers that may be able to at least give them counseling and hopefully representation for their type of immigration matter more directly. So feel free to have folks contact our office if we want to move to the next slide. It's really very similar contact info for our office and an overview of the resources we offer, and then just a QR code that folks can store. And then I just want to also note, so our website, it includes a Know Your Rights landing page that has links to many of the resources that Enrique mentioned. Of course, the fraud prevention resources that I mentioned, and then the calendar of events. And then if we move to the next slide, I mentioned earlier, our office is within the Department of Consumer and Business Affairs, often referred to as the People's Department because it manages and administers many of the community-facing programs and services that the county provides. And that includes consumer protection that I mentioned, but also the county's housing and tenant protections programs, including the Stay Housed LA program and the county's emergency rent relief program. So we've had 2 rounds of emergency rent relief assistance open, and those application periods are now closed, but those included an application period for folks impacted by federal immigration policies, including immigration enforcement. And we anticipate in the coming year another round opening in the coming fiscal year, and that will be administered again through our department. Folks can access information about the current eviction prevention resources if they are facing an eviction concern because of immigration enforcement or otherwise. There are resources available now. And then if and when the county reopens the emergency rent relief program, that information will also be accessible through the department. So I will pause there.
Yep.
And wrap
Thank
up.
you, Daniel. Thank you. We are running a little behind time, but I really want to thank you for 2 things. One, uplifting scams as an essential part of vigilance and awareness that is part of this overall work. It is not a subsidiary. It is a necessary part of this overall awareness and preparedness. And 2, I just want to thank you for making all of us perhaps better members of the county family. You know, county family is a term that we trot out and often invoke, especially in times of great stress and emergency. But your presentation here, and I think some of the tools you made us aware of and uplifted, helps all of us maybe be better members of the county family so that we can all be points of reference to help guide people with language fluency to available resources that can help them, just as you've taken the time both to present, but also to create as a catalog on your website, whether old or new on the website. We trust that it's there, and I think it helps all of us, including members of the Sheriff's Department, perhaps be better members of this county family, rising to meet this crisis together, which of course also affects members of the Sheriff's Department. So as we turn to Lieutenant Roberto Hernandez, who's been patient and waiting for his chance to present here tonight, we're very grateful to have representation from the Sheriff's Department here. Lieutenant Roberto Hernandez has been with LASD since before the turn of the century, 27 years logged with LASD and working in the patrol division. We're very glad to have you with us here tonight, and for your remarks about how you are navigating unconstitutional versus constitutional law enforcement practices and how you can help advise Angelenos on meeting this challenge and frankly, navigating this crisis that we are facing together. Thank you, Lieutenant Hernandez, for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, sir, and thanks for having me on here tonight. Good evening, everyone. From listening to the previous panelists, Mr. Robles as well, we understand some of the community's concerns that they have and some of the fears that they have with these ongoing ICE enforcement operations. And so I kind of want to begin, if we can start the presentation here, addressing some of these concerns that the community has when they come in contact with some of our deputy sheriffs. I know that all of our law enforcement agencies in the state are bound by our Senate Bill 54, but I'll speak specifically for the Sheriff's Department. But it's important that the public know that LA County Sheriff's Department enforces state and local laws, and immigration enforcement is the job of the federal government. The LA County Sheriff's Department does not engage in any type of immigration enforcement. We don't ask your immigration status. Your immigration status does not influence how we respond or answer calls for service. We cannot and will not arrest somebody solely for being undocumented. Additionally, we want the public to continue to report crimes. I know that at times the public becomes fearful of making those contacts with law enforcement, but it's incredibly important to us that the community continue to have trust in our department and continue to report those crimes so that we can address those issues appropriately. Our priority is obviously to build trust and to foster those strong relationships that we've been working on for decades, and also to ensure the safety of all of our the individuals and the communities that we serve in LA County. And we strive every day to treat all our community members with fairness, dignity, and respect. Next slide. And one of the other topics was our compliance with constitutional standards, due process, equal protection, and jurisdictional boundaries. And we adhere to these principles by building them clearly into our policies that are in line with the U.S. Constitution, our state laws, our manuals of policies and procedures, and our field operation directives that go out to all our field personnel. As things rapidly changed with the ICE enforcement, our field operations directives had to change quickly as well. As you can imagine, we are a very large organization, and to get information, to get the word out, and to get our deputies well informed so that they can better serve our communities can be challenging. And it takes in a tremendous amount of coordination and effort and work by our supervisors to make sure that our deputies understand those jurisdictional boundaries, that we do not engage in immigration enforcement. We reiterate that information through the training. We have a series of newsletters, like I said, field operations directives, daily or shift briefings. We also have a system of accountability, right? We're all held accountable for all our actions. We employ body-worn cameras, as a lot of our neighboring police departments do. We assess discipline and administrative action where that's warranted to make sure that our personnel at all ranks are held accountable and are following our policies and our procedures. Like I said, we regularly update our policies as needed. Sometimes when things are moving quickly, we have to move as quickly as well. And although we are a huge cruise ship, that we tend to that size sometimes affects us. It does take a whole lot of coordination and hard work on our part to make sure that our deputies understand and stay within the bounds of our policies and our state laws. Next slide, please. So one of the other topics of concern are the right to film our law enforcement officers. And I'm here to tell the public that it's their absolute First Amendment right to film law enforcement officers in public places. The U.S. courts have recognized this right and have protected it as an expressive authority. And some examples of lawful observation, right? We've all, I think, I've seen the social media videos, pretty much daily, and recording and observing from the public street, sidewalk, parks, traffic stops, arrests in public view, the public can absolutely record and observe those. It's their constitutional right. There are some public places, for example, like courthouses that are public buildings, that the public should be aware that there are some rules, some general orders that do not allow them to film inside. So although public building, that's something that they want to make sure that they look into before they try to film inside a courthouse. Interference is what we would consider physically obstructing one of our deputies, or crossing into an established police line where there's a boundary, where there's some investigation going on, there may be some evidence. And then kind of a rule of thumb, right, is if you're close enough to touch one of our deputies, or you're within the space of evidence, you're probably too close. And so we ask that the public understand and keep a reasonable distance, but it's their absolute right to be able to record and to document any of our activity. Some of our suggestions are that we ask is, for the public to, remain calm and respectful and keep that reasonable distance we just spoke about, not to physically insert themselves into any of the operations at hand, follow lawful commands, and obviously when it comes to evidence, to not interfere with the evidence or tamper with the evidence. And other than that, I think with that reasonable distance, they're in their total right to continue to record and observe and document. Next slide, please. So I know a big point that we dealt with last summer was the public being faced with some of the federal agents that were coming out that were not dressed in uniforms that clearly identified them as law enforcement. And that sometimes results in calls for service where the public is concerned that there's some sort of criminal activity occurring when some of the public come in contact with some of the federal agents. So as far as LASD, our uniforms, some of the things to look for, if you're not already familiar with our patrol deputies uniform, which is a Class A uniform, is the one that I'm wearing now. And we wear the olive green pants, obviously this tan shirt that I'm wearing now. It'll have our shoulder patches clearly visible on both sides that read Los Angeles County Sheriff Department. We'll wear our iconic 6-pointed star on our chest. And we'll also have either, depending on the type of shirt, if it's a cloth shirt with a cloth badge, it'll have a name tape across that's also made of cloth, or in this case, as I'm wearing the hard badge, I'll have a name plate with my last name on it. The public may also see deputies that are out on patrol that wear the outer duty vest, which is olive green in color, has clearly marked sheriff on the front or on the back. And it will always display the deputy's name on the front of the vest or a badge number. If there's ever a question about a deputy that the public may not be fully convinced that that person is a deputy, there's a question. We ask the public to request name and badge number of that particular deputy, or they can request a supervisor to respond to the scene that can then verify to them the identity of our deputy as a law enforcement officer. Additionally, we have a lot of really good resources. There's a really good brochure on our website, LASD.org, that has frequently asked questions on there that I think can be helpful. You can also find a short 2-minute video on there that has depictions of our Class A uniform, as well as some of our civilian staff, the identification mark on their that they wear their badges, and some of our non-patrol specialized units individuals also. So it's a short video on our website. You can find it, like I said, lasd.org /identifying dash LASD dash personnel. And there's a lot of other resources there that are specific to immigration. Our policies, our newsletters are all linked on there for the public to be able to view and to download if they like. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Lieutenant. And thank you for reminding folks how the department has itself tried to respond by doing some work and communications to help Angelenos distinguish between federal agents. If the masks weren't a giveaway enough, maybe the insignias and the uniforms are a very helpful identifier for who are LASD personnel versus others who may not even be operating on the level as federal agents. I just also want to recognize for our attendees, be prepared for questions for our remaining panelists. I believe Reverend Davis had to leave, as did Enrique Robles from the office of Congressmember Judy Chu. But we do have two panelists here with us. And I do want to make sure that we have time for questions from the gallery after hearing from these valuable guests and their presentations. One, I just want to get the ball rolling with Lieutenant Hernandez and to ask, from your perspective in patrol and as a veteran of the department, have you witnessed members of the department themselves and their families dealing with the enhanced and stepped up aggressive immigration enforcement here in Los Angeles County over the last year? It's a subject that the sheriff has spoken about, including at our COC meetings, including in his interviews with the press. But I'm just curious, I think it's a helpful point of reference for Angelenos to realize that this federal dragnet and the threat of abductions is not, it does not leave immune the families of uniformed personnel in our sheriff's department. And this is an aspect of the county family and one of the stories that it's important for our county family to put on the table. And I'm just curious if there are instances, no names required, obviously, or even specific cases, but that you might share that you've experienced with colleagues in dealing with this gauntlet that has beset all of us over the past year.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. I have not personally experienced or known anybody that has, but there are various documented incidents that have been on the news and have received some media attention where some law enforcement officers, out of uniform and off duty, have been detained by ICE agents until their identity is confirmed. So that is happening, and I think as residents of LA County, being in law enforcement, and just having this rich mix of different ethnicities and races and all that we have in our department, I don't think that anybody is immune. So, but I don't have a personal story or encounter of that type. But I do know that they exist.
Thank you. And I want to ask Daniel Sharp, if you would, how does it feel managing a department when you know that your caseload and your capacity, that the need outstrips what you're able to provide? I think you spoke about it in very diplomatic terms, but I just want to give you a chance to assess what resources might more be needed to meet the demand you're facing. How do you deal with the triage necessary to provide humane, dignified follow-through to the demand that you and your staff are under? And is there a story from some of your responsive work, or possibly even a prosecution of a fraudster that your department has played a role in executing that you might want to share with us. But I just want to make this real, because your department is dealing with, in some ways, trying to be a sponge amidst the Johnstown flood. And I just want to help surface some of that tension and reality for the listeners.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I very much appreciate that. I'm going to get closer to my mic there. So it's a real strain on emotionally on service providers, including our very small team that is interacting day to day with members of the public that are impacted, but nothing compared to what they're dealing with. And then also our office is often serving as the conduit to service providers in a network that we support, that we're part of, and they're really dealing with the day-to-day sort of strain of this. And so a couple things to note in this area. We have existed for just about 10 years to help uplift immigrant communities, help folks integrate and the like. We have in the last year and a half and get settled into our communities. In the last year and a half have spent more time fielding calls for family members whose relatives have already been deported, and for individuals who have made the decision to repatriate, to go back on their own. And so that is something that has really stuck with me, that the climate, the unwelcoming environment, and the fear and the uncertainty about being ripped away from one's family has made a number of individuals in the community make that decision on their own. Yeah. And so we have sometimes been helping people navigate a return to their country of origin resources. I do want to note, for folks returning to Mexico, the Loyola Law School Immigration Clinic is working with the University of Guadalajara. They have an innovative, excellent program to help people navigate a lot of the legal and practical barriers to repatriation, whether they're in Guadalajara or elsewhere in Mexico. But that is something new and a sad sign of these particular times.
One follow-up question. You know, all of us in the county family have been affected by curtailment as a result of a $4 billion settlement and other settlements that the county wrestles with. It's a subject that we deal with at the Oversight Commission. Have your own resources been subject to curtailment under the county budget crisis from the $4 billion settlement?
I mean, it's an important question for everything happening within the county. I do want to acknowledge that we've had a very supportive board of supervisors who has actually increased our immigration legal resources support really since November 2024. So the short answer is no, and we're very grateful for that. We've also seen the proactive approach that the board has taken in addressing many other policy gaps, and then supporting the emergency rent relief, also inclusive of households that have been impacted by immigration enforcement. Of course, one always wonders, but for that huge settlement money, what else could be done? But that's a separate question. We are grateful for the ongoing support we've had.
I really appreciate your framing it that way. So much more could be done if these settlements were not sending resources out the door or could be avoided in the first place. A very helpful observation. I want to turn to Robert Flores, who I think may have been navigating the chat and some of the questions bubbling up from our attendees for our remaining panelists. Robert, does anything strike you as particularly poignant for either of our remaining panelists?
So we're just a public comment procedure, and then we're going to hand it off to Nune so she can begin with that. So I'm going to go over the guidelines for making public comment. Public comment must relate to this listening session subject. Please keep your comments under 2 minutes. Please use the raise hand feature on WebEx. And if you're on the phone, please press *3. And I'm now going to go over these instructions in Spanish. Si desea hablar por Webex, levante la mano. Si desea hablar por teléfono, presiona *3. Simplemente diga la palabra español antes de comenzar y le diremos cómo proceder. Le daremos 2 minutos para sus comentarios públicos. Gracias. And I'll now pass it over to Nune.
Thank you, Robert. Chair Johnson, we have one public comment. Polling user, you're unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to. Am I unmuted? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Great,
go ahead,
great.
please.
Well, I wanted to know, is this a possibility to ask questions? Because I heard there was a place for asking questions and there was a comments. So is this the point of comments or questions, or are you okay with either or before I get started?
Please make a public comment. If we so choose to respond as a question, that is up to us as panelists.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. So what I'd like to know is you were speaking a little bit about legal help with regards to people that are dealing with issues, legal issues, and I was wondering, do you guarantee that somebody can have that legal help, that you can offer them legal help, or is it just a referral and a reference to each individual, that kind of situation? I was wondering, that's my first question I'd like to know, if that's okay to answer that or not.
Do you have a second question before we conclude?
Okay. Oh, sure. And then the other thing I wanted to know is if the oversight of LA County Sheriff, if that's the oversight of the sheriff, how does it intertwine with the Los Angeles city? Is it also overseeing Los Angeles, the sheriffs in Los Angeles, or just the Los Angeles County, or also let's say Hollywood as a sheriff or something like that? You guys oversee that as well? Is that like a civilian oversight for that as well, or just for the county of LA sheriff?
Does that conclude your comment?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I'll ask Dan, do you choose to answer the first question, if I might choose to answer the second question?
Yes, I'm happy to answer that question. And so, just to be succinct, we unfortunately cannot guarantee representation to all county residents impacted by immigration enforcement. So the numbers are of directly impacted folks far exceed the capacity of our programs and the state-funded immigration legal services programs combined. But we do have a sort of we make sure that the program is constantly operating at capacity, and when folks are under a certain income threshold and were residing in the county when impacted by enforcement, attempt to refer them for program representation. The program can provide folks. We've not failed to refer people for at least legal counsel in really all instances. And legal orientation and limited scope services are generally available to everyone, but the full scope immigration legal representation, unfortunately, is limited by program capacity and provider capacity.
And I'll choose to answer the second question. The COC, the Civilian Oversight Commission, provides oversight over the Los Angeles and alongside the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. That may include contract cities with whom the LASD has entered into contracts for the use of its services as local police departments. We do not have jurisdiction of oversight over LAPD. That is a separate agency operated by the city of Los Angeles. With that, I ask, are there other questions, or are there any other chat questions that have surfaced for our remaining panelists? Robert or Nune?
Chair Johnson, we have one more public comment, and this will be from Carolina Goodman. Carolina, you are unmuted. Please begin.
Informative session. I have a question for Daniel Sharp and one for Lieutenant Hernandez. For Daniel Sharp, you mentioned something about questions having to do with the public charge rule. I know this is very complex and you can't say everything, but can you describe what the most common question is about public charge that comes to you from people involved with immigration concerns? Okay, and my second question for Lieutenant Hernandez. When the Sheriff's Department receives calls for service from ICE or federal agents, what is the protocol for the Sheriff's Department? How do they respond?
Thank you, Carolina. Dan, you're first up.
Yes, I mean, it's a great question. There are many variations of the question, but just to be very brief, it takes the form of, I'm a green card holder, I'm a legal permanent resident as of a year or 2 or 10 years ago. Is there going to be an impact on the person who sponsored me if I access benefits? Might I lose my green card if I access a certain program or service? This comes in many forms. People who hold legal permanent resident status, folks who are undocumented, folks in temporary statuses are going through an immigration application process. That's some variation of that. If I access this, am I at risk? Or do I become safer by disenrolling from a benefit or service or program?
Thank you, Dan. Lieutenant, do you choose to answer the second question?
Yeah, if I could just clarify her question. Is she meaning calls for service the public makes about ICE, or was it like a call for service from ICE directly to us?
Why don't you handle both versions of that question, if you might, in the allotted time that we have remaining.
Oh, that's probably easier. Yeah. Okay. So ICE doesn't ever call us calls for service. If anything, they'll make an assistance request if they are, there's a crowd or there's any kind of like their safety's in danger, is when they'll call and they'll make an assistance request for us to respond and assist with, like a perimeter, or if they have a crime scene. As far as the calls for service that sometimes come in from the public, 90% of the time, we don't know that it involves ICE until there's preliminary investigation where the public believed there was a crime in progress, and it could be an arrest or a detention. And once our personnel get out there and realize that it's ICE, but it's handled as a call that we would handle normally under it, like any other circumstance. If in fact it's a concern by the community about a crime they believe is taking place, like a kidnapping or something of that sort.
Have you had any responses to calls from Angelino's emergency alerts that resulted in recognition of a fraudulent agent, or of someone who was pretending to be an ICE masked armed agent but who wasn't? Has any of those instances come about, or might you happen to be aware of one?
I don't know one specifically, but like I said, there are documented instances that we've seen in other police agencies where that's been the case, where the public has made those calls and said, they end up being victimized, like robbed or stuff like that. I don't know of any personally on our department, though.
Well, thank you again both for staying with us and for being part of this valuable discussion. We have reached the end of our allotted forum tonight on icy conditions, know your rights, and navigate the law. I want to ask if the dates for our upcoming COC meetings can be displayed here as we wrap up. And I want to thank members of the COC who are with us tonight, as well as the staff of the COC, including the Executive Director, Charmaine Mosley, who has joined me here in making tonight's forum possible. Our next commission meeting is Thursday, June 18th at 9 a.m. at St. Anne's Conference Center in South Silver Lake, North Koreatown. Thank you all for participating in this engagement. Let's continue promoting transparency, accountability, and meaningful change in law enforcement, and constitutional law enforcement at that. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks again.